have now the air has started to interact with the plumes. So these kind of complex structures or phenomena exist in a lot of situations. Not all of the situations are relevant from a industrial point of view, but from physics point of view, there are a lot of relevant things just to help us understand the physics of the problem. And it may have some industrial applications, not now, maybe later, but it's always good to understand. So now you can see that even this at a very, very high velocity, the cool air is not enough to extinguish it. So such things are there, right? There's some subtleties are there. And I'll come to a more, you can say, relatively less complex problem. Here, a solid metal, you can say, sphere was released into the pool, and the atmospheric pressure was changed there. It's in different atmospheric condition. And what happens is that you see that as this, the sphere goes in, then you see a splash. Then there is some breakup here. But there are some thin sheets along the interface also. Let me do what Sevadkarji did. Yeah. So along this wall here, you see that it's not even, right? So there is again very good complex behavior. You can say there is. So in this you can categorize it's a two-phase flow. Then you have large scale and small scale interface. What do we mean by large scale and small scale? It will become more clearer as we go. But just to understand that small scale would mean that they are more droplets or bubbles kind of thing. And large scale would mean that there is a very clear separated interface. So this is all large scale, this is small scale. Then you have breakup happening at the edges and the two droplets may coalesce. So that is a complicated phenomena. So with this basic introduction of flow, different kinds of flow, then one can actually see that you may have multi-phases. So generally you will have multi-phase when you have air and say water would be the most common thing. There are oil, there is sand. Sand also we treat as flow in some scenarios. So when you want to do pipeline flows, there is erosion modeling and all those things. So there will be possibility of multi-phases. Then there will be multiple flow regimes. By multiple flow regimes, what we mean, I think some concept of flow regimes has already been explained. Even in the last session, I saw that what we basically mean by that, the qualitative behavior or to an extent the quantitative behavior, when it is similar for two different kind of flows happening, then you say, okay, they are of similar regime. So what we mean is that if there is a stratified flow like this, there is a separated, right? Here everything is liquid, then there is an interface, and then there is oil. So if you will see this kind of, if you talk only about this location, the flow characteristic would more or less be similar if such kind of characteristic occurs in some other flow situation. So that is what we mean by flow regime, that a particular behavior will be similar if you are classifying it as a regime. So within regime, the classification or this behavior or modeling will be similar. So when you say when liquid is dispersed in gas, which means it's a droplet kind of thing. When gas is dispersed in liquid, it's a bubbly kind of thing. And you have gas and liquid interface. Now that is a multiple flow regime kind of situation because in the single problem itself, you see locally different regimes. So what we want to now do is that if we are able to model this, then we could do really industrial kind of problems where you want to design turbine, boiler, evaporators. Then there is this, especially the last session was very relevant for the structural design when you have flow across bluff bodies, and it's an external flow across bluff bodies. So that's very important to design structures. Some of the things which are more relevant for the multi-phase flow are actually chemical process equipments where you have mixer, separators, bubble columns. And nowadays, CFD has actually kind of started to make a headway in the life science equipment where you have inhalers and tablet coating equipment and other things. So recently with this pandemic, there was this breathing simulations. Lot of research groups did. They had mask, then they do simulations and all those things. So those all things actually come into the category of multiple regime. It's a multiple flow regime, multi-phase flows. Now, how to go about it basically? So best thing is, okay, we'll take a very good camera and visualize it. So that's a very qualitative information. That may not give you an engineering quantity directly what you need. So basically you have to translate. If you are actually doing the visualization, then you need a way to translate that into some measurable quantities. So what are these quantities? This is mass. Mass is basically means you have to quantify it by density. To quantify momentum, you need viscosity, velocity, pressure. Energy by temperature. Even velocity is used to quantify energy. If you have, there is a potential energy also. And then when we talk about multi-phase flow, then we have to also talk about phase occupancy. So basically in a domain, you have to understand where a particular phase is present. So that information comes from volume fraction. So volume fraction is more or less, you can say, a de facto across other methods. So I'm talking about Eulerian methods. I'll come to the Lagrangian and Eulerian point of view, but across all the Eulerian techniques, volume fraction would be the primary variable to determine where your phase exists at a given point in time at a given location. So these are the quantities that we need to solve. And so then we'll say, this is, I think, a very, very basic thing, but I just to give a background is that when we're talking about multiple flow regimes, then it's not always possible to do it experimentally. Analytically, there are very, very big limitations because this is a non-linear flow mostly. So you have to, when we do theoretical, then we have to do mostly for really practical problems, you have to go for CFD. Thing is that we still need to validate it. But there are limited experimental results, but there are small models, reduced models in which we do. And then we also supplement by some analytical study that in limiting conditions, when the system will behave in a linear fashion, then you can derive actual solutions and then try to validate it. So that's more like a verification. This again is a very basic thing, but everybody you knows. But I'll just give one just for sake of completeness, that when you have to do some theoretical analysis, the two viewpoints. So one of them is the Lagrangian approach, in which what you do is that you actually follow the flow. You move through that space and time. So you track in a way each and every particle you need to track. So if you are talking about droplets, then one droplet will be your one particle, and then you evaluate how it moves through the space. The other and what actually the numbers have shown is relatively computationally efficient thing is to do an Eulerian kind of a modeling where you define your control volume, you have a control surface, and then you just account for whatever goes across it, across the control surface, and that would give you a very, you can say, one kind of picture about what's happening. So we will be following Eulerian here. Now I'll move to what are the different simulation techniques for multi-phase flow. Basically the Eulerian simulation techniques. So one class of techniques is called interface capturing. Another is called interface modeling. In the Lagrangian framework, there is something called as interface tracking, which we are not discussing here, but there is the third thing, interface tracking, which is computationally expensive. It has its own benefits, some shortcomings, but for this presentation, we'll be sticking to on your Eulerian things. So interface capturing is a very, very, you can say, well-established now technique to analyze, you can say, spatially large interface flows, where basically the two fluids are separated. And if you want to do a detailed analysis of a particular phenomena, then such kind of approach is very, very good. And this, you can say, it's more closer to doing a DNS of a particular flow. So basically like droplet dynamics or wave dynamics you want to do, then you can use the volume of fluid or level set kind of, or even combination of these two. The other class of modeling technique for two-phase flow or multi-phase flow is interface modeling, where you do not actually do it. I mean, it's an Eulerian technique, but it has its own way of modeling the interface. So you do not kind of capture the interface, you model it. So I'll go into details here, but right now just bear with me. But it is actually used for dispersed flows more. I mean, so the idea is that you have a bigger domain in which you want to solve, but you have very large number of droplets or bubbles. So you cannot do individual bubbles and droplets like the Lagrangian thing. You cannot even capture each and every interface, because it will mean that you have to use a very fine mesh. So then the idea is to average the whole thing over the domain, do an ensemble average, and then solve the averaged equations. So that is the two fluid model. We'll come to detail for this. But this is used to do dispersed flows mainly, like bubble columns or mixers. And this category is more applicable, you can say, for industrial flows. This you can, I mean, this is a very this distinction is also now becoming very less. Somebody would argue that okay, this you do for more kind of academic work where you want to really understand the physics of the problem. This would be like, you know, you get an engineering solution very quickly. But now this boundary, this demarcation is also been removed now. So people are doing both for both now. So I'll come to that. This before like moving into the actual technique, I just would like to I mean you have already seen this in these FDP, but I'll just again reiterate that when you have an Eulerian view, you do the conservation. So conservation basically says that rate of change of the quantity in the control volume is equal to whatever is coming in due to advection, whatever is coming in due to diffusion from the control surface, and then whatever is increasing due to source. So this is a very general conservation statement which is common for all the equations. And then what you do if you want to derive an governing equation, then you take this conservation statement, you translate it into actual quantities. Like we said that mass is represented by density. When you are talking about multi-phase flow, then you have to bring in volume. So for this volume, delta x into delta y, when you multiply by alpha, then it gives the volume of that particular phase into the density of that phase will give you the mass of that phase. So that's why we are talking about mass of a particular phase. And then the conservation statement can be written like this. When you divide it by the volume and take the limits, you get the conservation equation, which is conservation of mass. And similarly, if you do for other things, you get the general conservation equation. So this conservation equation is common for all the interface capturing or interface modeling techniques. There is one subtle difference, however. In interface capturing, the velocity is shared between all the phases. The pressure is always shared, but velocity is shared for all the phases in the interface capturing. In interface modeling, individual phase will have their own velocity. So I'll come to that in detail. So that is a subtle difference. And in CFD, like I think this again has come, but I'll come back to this, is that your governing equations are continuous. So you need, when you want to solve it, you need to convert it into a linear algebraic equation to solve. So there is something called as discretization to solve the equation. So in the discretization, again, there are two things that we discretize. We discretize the domain and we discretize the equation. So for example, I'll show the example of both. When you have an continuous CV, you know, when we kind of derive the equation, then you kind of approximate this continuous CV with a finite control volume. Finite control volume means it's a discrete control volume. You have its size, there is a cell center, so this is non-zero. Here the delta x and delta y tend to 0. It is supposed to be very small, but here now it has a finite volume, hence the finite volume method. And when you write the conservation statement, and then you write the you can say the continuous form of the equation, and if you approximate these things by the discrete things, you can directly get the conservative form of the discretized equation. So this is the way we followed actually during my PhD. rather. So there is a classic way when you do, the integration and stuff, but there is an alternative way also. This works well when you have kind of Cartesian mesh and stuff, but you have to be very careful when you have complex geometry to do this directly. There would be some more things involved, but not to go into that detail. But the point is that you start from a conservation statement. You derive a discrete equation, and then you have from a domain, you also have created a discrete cell, you can say, which represents this. So the idea is that whatever value which you represent at cell center is actually same everywhere in the domain. So that's the approximation. Similarly for cell face also, the same approximation, that whatever you define at face is same everywhere at the face. And once you get this equation, you will see that, okay, this has a rho in it, this has an alpha in it. Then you would see that, okay, here there is some u. Then in momentum equation there is some u. So there are algorithms which will correlate the different equation. I'm sure you must have by now you have seen the pressure corrector or pressure correct. So there are two methods, like simple kind of algorithms or projection method, to solve the Navier-Stokes equation. So those things you have to do to solve. So this is a typical CFD workflow, that you discretize the domain, then you initialize all the variables, and then you solve the linear algebraic equation of each variable. This is the step in which it may happen that, okay, you are using the momentum equation for velocities, then the continuity equation will be used to get the pressure. You have a equation of conservation of mass for volume fraction. These equations are intertwined. You have to solve them iteratively. Once it is solved, then you can calculate the derived quantities, and that's the general thing. I'm sure everybody knows this, but just to. So now I'll actually now start to go into details of each of the techniques here. So first we'll start with volume of fluid or level set method. Now the thing is that if you have seen right now, I mean till now in this course, the solution of single phase kind of equations, where the density is same everywhere, and viscosity is also same, and there are no other interfacial issues involved. What happens when you have multi-phase flows? At this moment, when you have multi-phase flows, the core issue that comes is the treatment of the interface. How do you recognize where the interface is? Then how do you evolve it? So what happens in the level set or volume of fluid method? You have a particular variable which is used to solve that issue. So in level set method, there is a variable called as level set variable, which is basically the distance from the interface. Just to say, okay, when you start, you have an interface already, and then you have to say, okay, from this interface, what is the distance? You will get a field like that. In volume of fluid method, it's just the volume fraction. So if you have a half filled domain, the bottom half will have the volume fraction as 1, top half will have volume fraction as 1. And this volume fraction is then used to calculate the fluid properties of the to solve the Navier-Stokes equation. In level set method, additionally, what you do, since you define the distance of interface, then you have to obtain the volume fraction from the distance function. And all the phases have a common velocity and pressure field. The benefit of this method is that you can capture this breakup and coalescence are implicitly captured. We'll see that in example. But if there is some additional physics like surface tension or phase change, you have to do it additionally. So all of you who actually would like to, learn more about it, I would really recommend this paper, which is a very good review paper. It has now more than 300 citations now, and it's a very good paper. And just to to identify, I mean, I have talked about volume of fluid and level set. There is phase field method, there is conservative level set method, there is combined level set volume of fluid method. So all these methods are actually discussed in this with relative strengths and this thing. So for your application, you can look at it. So I'll show some example of the level set method here, which we did at IIT Bombay. Now, when we talked about interface capturing, I mentioned that when you have to study some phenomena in detail, then this is very good kind of approach. So here we are talking about the coalescence of a single droplet, and it's called cascade coalescence because the total coalescence doesn't happen in a single you can say in a single coalescence process. You start from a big drop here, and after the first coalescence you form another drop, and which again coalesces, and then that process goes on like a cascade. So this is what we are saying, that the coalescence here we have not done any additional modeling. This line actually is the contour of the level set function of 0, which means that this is the interface. So the coalescence you can say, and the breakup also, because here there is some breakup happening and then coalescence happens. So it's implicitly captured. But if you see, there are small tiny waves which happen at the interface that are due to the surface tension effects. And those effects have been modeled with an additional model which is only active at the interface. So because of the thing, I'll not go into the exact numerical details. You can go back and refer if you're interested. But this is just to demonstrate the capability of this method for emulating this flow. Then this is another kind of application. This is a phase change application. So I'll start here. I'll just explain a bit about this. So you have a domain here, and everywhere you have filled, everywhere you have a vapor here, which is, this blue is liquid, which is already at saturation temperature. So this is a phase change kind of problem. The bottom wall is superheated by 5 Kelvin. And here you have superheated vapor. So the temperature of the vapor, it is high near the wall, and it is at the interface, it is at Tsat for the given system pressure. This is just to study the film boiling. By film boiling, we mean that there is a continuous vapor which separates the liquid and the wall always, and this is a periodic phenomena. So to study this, what we did is that we have plotted the contour of the interface. This black line is interface. So this color contour is the temperature, and then we are plotting the Nusselt number at the wall here with time. And what we see is that there is a peculiar behavior of Nusselt number. So basically, we have then divided the whole cycle into 3 stages. So for 1A and 1B, these are the bubble growth, in which first the vapor hat forms and then vapor bulb. By vapor bulb, we mean that the curvature of the interface here, if you see right now the interface is like this, it will then suddenly become an hourglass shape here, like this. So this is at the peak here. And then we have the breakup and recoil. So your interface breaks, and then the interface here comes back. And then this is 2A is breakup, 2B is recoil. By recoil, we mean that this interface then comes back, and then the side, basically the side of the this bubble formation actually shifts. So the next formation will start from this side, okay, which is actually not shown in this animation, but that's so. To analyze that why the shifting happens, what we did is that we plotted the temperature, and what happens is that just before the breakup, you see this is the temperature field. This is the temperature field, and then you see that there is some cool vapor here which gets entrapped here. And when the recoil happens, the cool vapor and hot vapor here mix. But the hottest vapor, which is this horn kind of thing which has formed, it is actually pushed towards the antinode. So we call this site as node and this site as anti-node, and it pushes there. What happens is that you have an accumulation of hotter vapor now here, and because this site became more hot as compared to this, your second vapor bubble formation happens here. So this kind of analysis, if somebody has to do to understand, why this periodic behavior is like this, and why continuously only, why don't we see everything happening only on this side. So these kind of analysis can be done using an interface capturing kind of a technique. And then this is another application which one of our colleague, or you can say classmate, Dr. Afsar, he did study. So this is again using level set method, but this is just to understand whatever the bubble dynamics due to increasing injection velocity. So as you go on increasing injection velocity, there is a velocity in which your droplet diameter changes, the frequency changes. Then you see different kinds of behavior that, successive two bubbles get coalesced here. But then here no coalescence is happening. The height of the jet, basically, that also goes on increasing with the increasing injection velocity. So this phenomena can be actually explained in detail with the different interfacial forces like surface tension and shear stress at the interface and all those things. And such interface capturing method can enable you to analyze these things. So that's the summary of this. Then I'll move to the modeling technique. So this is what was like I used to do. I did during my time at IIT Bombay. With moving to the industry, what we find is that more or less people are interested in a bigger picture. They want a macro quantity. They are not very keen on. They are keen. They want to know what is happening there, but that is not very of immediate interest, you can say. So when we talk about multi-phase flows, we generally see the instantaneous picture, like we saw for the three applications: the coalescence, the film boiling, and the bubble formation. Now those were, like, you can say, single bubble, or single jet was there, although multiple bubbles were there, but single jet is there. And then you have even in film boiling we did was a single kind of a site analysis. However, when we want to do a very large geometry, then we have a very big presence of bubbles or droplets. So we cannot go on modeling, capturing each and every of these things. So what the approach is followed is very simple. It's actually very easier said than done, but the strategy is very simple, that you do an ensemble average. And what you get is an average picture of this. So instead of each and every droplet or bubble being shown, you will see a diffused kind of a picture, which will represent an average presence there. So what happens? You do the time and this ensemble average for conservation equations. The phases will still share the pressure field, but what happens is that each conservation equation, for momentum, you will have a momentum equation of each phase. Now each phase will have its own velocity, its own volume fraction. Sum of volume fraction is obviously 1. Pressure is still shared, and this is called interpenetrating continua, which actually means that at a given point both the phases can coexist. That's the kind of a logic, basically. Like when you're talking about a cell, if it is volume fraction is 0.3, then we are saying that the other phase is also there with volume fraction 0.7. So it will have its own momentum, it will have its own everything. So you can have multiple velocity, temperature field, but a single pressure value. And what it leads to is that then you have to say then how one phase is communicating with the other phase. When you do the ensemble average, then you have to specify how the interaction between the two phases is happening, which gives rise to drag force, lift force, etc. So the Again, without going into the equations, I'll come to the equation, but without going into the equations, philosophically, the thing is that then what we see is that the two-fluid model gives a very general framework, because you are now saying that individual phase has its own momentum equation, which essentially makes it like a single phase modeling, but with different phases. Now you are saying, okay, at a time I have two single phases, and then how they are interacting, I have to just worry about that. So that's kind of a very powerful framework. Then what it enables is that then you can do different combination of flows, like even liquid gas particle flows. And this, then the question comes about the slip. There is something called a slip, which basically means the velocity difference between the two phases. If one phase is at u1, another phase is at u2, then the difference of the velocity is called the slip. And based on the slip, the interactions are governed, is basically. So you can actually then model this. There are different experiments in which people have found what the slip will be, how the drag will be. And so if you do that modeling, then you can do some things like separators, mixers, bubble columns. Because the separators and mixers, etc., such things cannot be done with interface capturing at all. Because in that, in the interface capturing, you have the same velocity field. So what it basically means is that both the phases will move in one direction at same rate. In this particular thing, when you have separation, you can actually see that, okay, air phase can move up, or the lighter phase can move up, and the heavier phase can go down. So actually the velocity by physics is basically different. It's not the same velocity field. So this is kind of a more physical basis it has. Then the thing comes, another is a size variation. How do you model the size variations of bubbles and droplets? So that other models are there, people can include. But so this is our colleague Mohit, and he has published one paper on the validation of different gas liquid systems. It's a very detailed validation for the two fluid model, what we have in our code in CCM+. So again, to come back to the mathematical modeling, now the form of the equation is similar as it was for interface capturing. The only major difference is there are 2 points. Here, the rho, alpha, everything is for individual phases now. So this U is for an individual phase. And you have this interaction force, which is basically drag or lift. So basically what I was just saying, that you can have, say, this is this white thing is a background phase, which is moving at some velocity. You can have dispersed particles which move at some other velocity. So the difference between these two velocities is the drag force. This is very similar to what Seotkar just explained about the flow around the Bloch bodies. Because your Bloch body, if it is stationary, so its velocity is 0, and then whatever velocity you have in the surrounding phase will exert some force on that. That is the drag force. So here also the same concept comes. The only thing is that this dispersed particle is also moving at a velocity, and the difference of the velocity will govern the drag, kind of. So this is one of the. So I'll now move to the some of the work, I mean, which you can do with this. So this is a bubble column. Now we saw that single droplet, a single bubble situation where we were just interested about knowing the velocity at which you get particular shape and size bubble. But what if you have millions of bubbles coming in? So this whole bubble, actually a bubble column, behaves as a single entity kind of. It actually oscillates. It has its own period, and it oscillates. So when you want to do this, you do the whole ensemble average and actually model this. So this will be kind of a time average picture which you see. But the interesting thing is that when you compare with experiments, so the experimentally also the data has been averaged over the time. So when you compare this data with whatever you are getting as an solution from two-fluid model, then you see that it is quite close. Very important point to mention here is the mesh. If you see, it's a relatively very coarse mesh. If somebody had to do millions of droplets, they would, for using interface capturing, then they would require really, really fine mesh. But that's not the case with two fluid model. So here you can go with a relatively coarser mesh and get a similar result, which will give you a similar engineering quantity that is of interest. So if somebody is really interested in such application, there is a paper here from our group. Then another application is suspension of silica, the sand particles. So what happens is that you have a water and silica kind of a mixture here, and then you have a rotor here. If you move this, if this rotates at a particular RPM, then the whole this silica becomes suspended. Kind of, there is a suspension here. So what it means is that there will be water filling in between, so there will be some pores or some gap between the silica which will be filled with water. If you increase the RPM, then this height will increase. Now this is important from some applications like reactions or something. If somebody has some powder and they want to transport it somehow, or they want to do some chemical reaction, they want a particular size gap between the particles. So they want to know at what RPM, if you are rotating, then that gap will be available for particular kind of reaction to happen. So this kind of analysis. So if we imagine this with an interface capturing or any other Lagrangian point, if you want to do it as a single particle, these are billions of particles. So this will become very difficult to do with any other approach. But this would provide you good qualitative as well as quantitative behavior. So these are experiments, and this is what we get from simulation. So the volume fraction, actually, if you see the volume fraction, the max volume fraction here is 0.37, which means that 37% of this is particle, the rest is water. Here also it is, as you see, this goes down from 37%, it goes to 33%, and here 25.6% sand is there, rest is water here. I mean, this is the maximum value I'm talking about, but there is variation here. So at a given point, you will see that the amount of water has increased, which indicates, actually you can actually get a measure of now how far away are they, because we modeled the diameter of the particle, and for a particular cell, then you can say that how much gap is there between two successive particles. That information can be extracted from this. Then this is another application which is basically used to in the pharmaceutical industry. Here the thing is that you have so this is a single experiment in which you have different spheres, or basically you can say particles of different sizes, say 3 mm, 4 mm, 5 mm, and 6 mm, and then you rotate this drum. All you do is that you have you can say a combination of these size of particles. You rotate the drum. Over a period of time, the smallest particle will come to the core, followed by the larger, and so the largest particle will come at the extreme. So this can be this information can be used for tablet coating, any other information. If you just want to segregate some particular size things, you can put an outlet at that location and it will come out from that. If you want to separate, even I think nowadays people do with groundnuts, with peanuts. I mean, with things. If they want to just put it, all the same similar sizes things in a particular packet, then such things are analyzed. And this again shows the effectiveness of the two fluid model to do this very nicely. So this is kind of, I think this is an experimental data which they have processed like this. There is a researcher called known as Alizadeh. This is a very well-known case, kind of a reference benchmark case, which we have done with our code. This has been published for reference. Now I'll come to what I have been doing mostly. So my task, coming from a background of interface capturing, was to come up with a methodology in which you can actually solve separated as well as dispersed flows together. So on all the two fluid model examples that I showed, they were all predominantly dispersed flows. They were all mixed flows, kind of. You will see that there will be always droplet and bubbles or particles like that. In all the level set examples that I showed, everything was always separated. But now the practical problems which we see have both dispersed and separated flows together in the domain, and that is a real challenge. So first challenge is what, so do we need a completely new method, or can we extend one of the methods to do that? So what we actually started to analyze is that when you start with interface capturing, it actually relies always on resolving the interface. So this really makes it expensive for the dispersed kind of thing. So that's why we didn't pursue with this. We followed the interface modeling, in which you have a framework, which you have individual momentum equation. All you have to do is that you have to model the right interface transfer for the separated kind of situation to make it work like interface capturing. So this is what we have come up with. So this has been recently published. I mean, not now recently, but it's already now 3 years. So it has been published, and what we have introduced is something called as a large-scale interface or multiple flow regime model in an Euler or two-fluid model framework. So the idea is that, see, this is a general, I mean, this is kind of an industrial flow scenario. You will have large interface, you will have bubbles, droplets, everything you'll have. And we want to actually, model separated multiphase flow in conjunction with the dispersed multiphase flow. So first thing that we did, just a minute. First thing that we did is that we kind of restricted ourselves to definition of regimes based on the topology. By topology, what we mean is that if we are talking about a gas and liquid, then how that gas and liquid are related in a given cell, or how they exist in a real cell, is topology. So that is like, you can say if they are separated or dispersed. So we define like 3 regimes based on that. The first regime, we say when secondary phase is dispersed in primary phase. So if you are talking about gas and liquid, for a moment, if we say gas is secondary and liquid is primary, then we'll say the bubbly flow is the primary regime. Then you have interface regime, and then you have a droplet kind of regime when you say primary phase is dispersed in secondary phase. So this, we think, broadly classifies kind of the regimes that we get generally. Then this is like a philosophical definition, but how to actually quantitatively do it. So before moving to that, then so this is again, I'll continue with that kind of the framework thing. So then what we do for a cell, if we are in a cell, what we do, we give weights to individual regimes. We say, okay, this will have particular weight, this will. So if the cell is here, so if the cell is here like this, sorry about the, I think it will just, if a cell is here, then what it means is that the weight of this regime, droplet regime, and the bubble regime will go to 0, and only weight of the intermediate regime will stay here. If the cell is here, then it will be modeled like this. If the cell is here, then it will be modeled only like this. So to enforce that, what we need is that we need to define some kind of weight function. So this, we kind of found one reference which is very kind of very robust in a way, in which you define this regime based on the volume fraction of secondary phase. And it's just basically from experience, actually, more than anything in this field, people say that when you are in a cell, if your volume fraction of the secondary phase is more than 0.3, you cannot say it is clearly dispersed. So rather than saying that how longer it will be dispersed, people have actually said that after a particular volume fraction, it can no longer be treated as dispersed. So which is the volume fraction of 0.3 for the secondary phase. Conversely, similarly, that works for 0.3 for the primary phase on the other side. And it's, so if you are talking about in terms of only secondary phase volume fraction, then you say, okay, when the volume fraction is more than 0.7, it will become secondary regime. And the interface regime here between, so this is kind of, it has, so people are not saying that this will be an interface regime. They are just saying that this will not be the disperse regime. So there you can do different kind of modeling. I'll actually come to that. So then how it actually works is that you calculate the drag, how you do in a traditional sense for the first regime and second regime. And then for the interface regime, you work on minimizing the interface slip, because in the interface, both the phases will have more or less the same velocity, which is the logic behind the interface capturing methods. In the interface capturing method, we take the same velocity everywhere. But the idea is that at the interface, the velocity at the you can say at the interface, the boundary condition, the natural boundary condition means that there cannot be any jump between the velocities. Both the phase velocities will be same exactly at the interface. But when you talk about cell, you can say it will be very close to zero. So that is actually enforced by this drag force here. So you can say this is a this kind of a drag force is you can say a pragmatic choice rather than something which comes from physics when you are deriving this thing. But this is kind of a value which will try to equalize the velocities of both the phases. And once you have the drag forces for the three regimes at a cell, you calculate the weight function at a cell based on the volume fraction of secondary phase. Then you just make a weighted average, I mean the weighted sum here, and you get the drag force. So that's the closure which is required. So then what we did is that we went to benchmark this basically using different standard test cases. So this is one of the very standard Dambrick simulation problem, which we generally do for volume of fluid or level set kind of method. And here we measure height, interface height at two different locations and pressure at a point. The interesting thing to note here is that this is done using two fluid model. So there is a water velocity everywhere in the domain. There is air velocity everywhere in the domain. We have specified drag for the three regimes here. And what we are expecting is that the result should be similar to the interface capturing thing, because this is that, like, we are using two fluid model for large interface cases. So this is one of the results. So the contour, how I have done is that we have said, okay, 0 means 0 to 0.3 is white here. This is the first regime. 0.3 to 0.7 is the interface regime, and 0.7 to 0.1 is the second regime. You can see that we are able to capture qualitatively in this. You get, it rises on the wall, then you see splash and those things. And when we compare with the experimental results, then we see that, okay, we are getting reasonably good match even in pressure here. So this gives some confidence that, okay, we can actually use two fluid model to do large interface kind of cases. Then we did another benchmarking. So this is against experimental data again. And also we have compared with the numerical results of Dr. Nandi and Professor Date from IIT Bombay. So they did this problem. So here the thing is that you have an initial water level and you give it an undulation here. This is the movement that you give as a source term, and the interface is supposed to, slosh basically. This is a sloshing problem. And at a given time, you expect that the interface will be at a particular position. This is what we are getting, which are very, very close to the experimental data. So again, the thing to keep in mind is that this is a very straightforward case with a volume of fluid kind of situation. But this is with a two fluid situation, two fluid model. We are getting similar results just because we have modeled the drag of the large interface in a particular way. Then extending that, we also incorporated the surface tension model. So surface tension model is, the treatment is exactly same as you do in single, the interface capturing kind of model. In the two fluid model, the only difference is that you distribute the total force into based you just weight that the total force from using the alpha of the individual phase. So that's the only difference. Otherwise, the formulation is exactly same. And this also we were able to reasonably capture. So here still we have not done. I mean, I have not shown you any multiple flow regime case. I'm still showing you the results using two fluid model for the interface. I mean, for the cases which have very sharp interface always, and the very separated interfaces. This is one more. Now, I'll actually move to very specific modeling that you need to do when you're talking about industrial two-phase flows. It's called something known as interface turbulence damping. This is a very, very wide and kind of unknown thing, that when you have two-phase flows, when you have a stratified flow, suppose, then the interface will behave as a wall for the lighter phase. If it behaves as a wall, it means that it is very close to that interface. The flow will be laminar. So what we need to do when we are solving the turbulence equations, we need to make sure that the near the large interface, the turbulence is damped. So this is actually achieved using a turb damping model. This is a very you can say now. I mean, this is really old paper, but not many people have picked that up, and it's not very well used, you can say. But it's a very critical thing when you are working in large pipelines and you want to predict that pressure drop correctly. So what it entails is that you have to. I mean, there is a basically you need to do wall treatment at the large interface. So what it means, and for us, we have done this low RE treatment, and you estimate this from cell volume. Now we have implemented the interface distance also. So we actually get the interface distance from the. So I've kind of working on bringing in level set into this. So which is not actually part of this particular presentation, but we have successively published. You can find that from that. But the point is that you need this additional modeling if you are working on large pipelines. So the context of explaining this here is that if you are actually thinking of doing large pipeline flows, then do take a look at turbulence damping. That's very important. So to give you an example, this is a very simple. Again, it's kind of simple case, but the thing is that it's a very long pipe. You have a 10 centimeter by 20 centimeter cross section, but the pipe is 12 meters long. It's a really long pipe considering the cross section here. And we want to, and it's a stratified flow case, but we are interested in the axial velocity profile and pressure drop. So there is an experimental data here. And the fun thing with two fluid model is the mesh. You can see it's 384 by 52. So this takes about 15 minutes to run. So anybody working would actually appreciate this. Like if you get some result of engineering relevance within a couple of hours, then it's a very good thing. And here we actually see that this dots, basically you can say circles, are the experimental velocity field at a particular location, which is 9.1 meter from the inlet. And we see that when you don't have, so basically we have done everything. I mean, if you can repeat this with volume of fluid also. We have predicted the interface, we have done everything right, but we didn't get the velocity we filled right here. And the pressure drop, the experimental pressure drop was 2.1 Pascal per meter. We got 17.4. When you include turbulence damping, all we are saying is that at the interface, the turbulence quantities will be minimized. What it does is that it makes the flow very, very close to experimental this thing. And the pressure drop, especially pressure drop, is evidently better. Now, if you actually see the experimental result, you will see that this dotted line here is the interface. You can actually clearly see, so top air is flowing, bottom water is flowing. The profile of the velocity for water, it looks like flow over a flat plate actually, but the profile of velocity for the air actually looks like flow in a channel. So it is very clear that for air phase, the interface is actually acting as a wall, a moving wall, basically moving wall with the velocity of the interface. But nonetheless, it's a wall. So it's this part is like a channel flow. This part is like a flow over a flat plate. However, when we don't do that, what is happening is that this effect is somewhere else. Basically, it's actually not captured even. Even in this our thing, we see that this is still a very diffused interface. So we have actually now remedied this. We are now getting very close, but these are the original results which I'm sharing. So that's the subtlety of such modeling, that when you are talking about multi-phase flows, then you have to see that the same interface can behave as a different thing for different phases based on its own fluid properties. So the same interface behaves like a wall for the air phase, but for water it doesn't do anything special. So another result for similar, so this is like a Venka channel, which is an entrainment canal. So this we actually work with these guys sometimes. It's in Germany, and what they have done is that they have this counter current flow limit. So I'll come to the counter current flow limit, which is very relevant from the nuclear point of view. Let's see how much time I have. Yeah, I'll just accelerate a bit now. So you see that there is this channel. Then at the so water enters from this side at some height, and air enters from here at from completely there is air. So air velocity is nearly 8 or 9 times, 9 times or something like that as compared to water. So this is in counter current flow. The objective is that experimentally they have found that there is a particular way or say flow field which is developed, and we want to see if we can capture it or not. So first and foremost result is that the experimentally the flow that they had set is that the interface does not rise above this height. They have a particular height at the inlet what they are setting. It's the same height the water continues. So what we did that when we have turb damping model, then we see that this is actually captured very nicely. If you don't have turb damping, then you see that the water, when you have air, so for air, if the interface is not made to behave like a wall, it will try to deform that wall. That's what is happening. It is trying to deform this wall and it's bringing it up here, the airflow from this side. And when you compare with the experiment, then you see, okay, with damping, the interface height has reasonable match. Again, the main thing, the pressure drop. Pressure drop is in case of with turb damping, it's very close, but without turb damping, it's very far off. So such subtle things are needed to model these kind of flows accurately. Same thing evident from, again, if you see for water, it's like flow over flat plate. For air, it's flow in a channel, but in the opposite direction. And this actually shows that why for such problems you would actually require something like two fluid model, because you are not taking the same velocity. One velocity goes this direction, another velocity goes this direction. So that's then I'll actually not go into details here. This is like a similar to drag, but we also have model phase change in this. We have already published it at a nuclear engineering conference. I'll come to the application now. So this is a water hammer experiment. What happens is that you have an accident scenario. There is a hot light here, and it is completely filled with hot steam or superheated steam, and there is some water which is released here to cool this thing down. Now the issue, what happens is that if you inject water at a particular velocity, then you will see that it will condense, it will form a slug, and that slug may condense quickly, really resulting in a pressure spike, which is called as water hammer. So the idea is that when you are releasing water into this, it has to be at a particular, or it has to be below a particular thing, so that if phase change is very nice and you don't form pockets of steam. If you form pockets of steam, then it may lead to spike in pressure and it may break the pipe. So that's the motivation behind this. And this is how we modeled it. We actually modeled it as a cylinder, and there's an inlet, subcooled thing. And so I'll just show the animation here. So here water is entering. Now, interesting thing is that steam, there's a steam reservoir, right? So steam is always coming in, and water is going up, and you will see that there will be some, yeah, you see this kind of, so it's kind of very subtle thing, but like, yeah, this pocket. So this will actually reflect in the pressure jump. If you actually see there are pressure spikes like this entrainment kind of thing happen. So these things should be avoided. So such thing has to see, we have to see. So this is with time. If you see, right, this got entrained here, kind of, and there were subtle things. I mean, this is a 3D case. We are just plotting the section. Yeah, but there were something. Interestingly, we see that we are able to get the spikes here. Basically, when you so this is the spike in the rate of phase change. The spike in the rate of phase change means that the interface area was suddenly you get more phase change, basically, because if the temperature is high, or if you have surrounded the whole thing like this. So this is like one more application of this thing. I will quickly move to the industrial applications that we have done. So these were all more or less like kind of validations, benchmarks, some application. But this is one of the very major application that we have kind of done. This is again related to nuclear engineering, and it's a hot leg of a pressurized water reactor. So this is after an accident scenario, similar to what we did with the water hammer thing. But here the thing is that you have, so here there is no phase change first and foremost. There is one group who did experiments using air and water just to understand the hydrodynamics of this. So you have an air inlet here. This is an outlet, and you inject water from this. The quantity of interest is this, that when you inject air and you have water from here, you will see some counter current flow here, and based on the velocity of air and velocity of water, this inflow may get choked. Basically, you may see that the water no longer flows down here, and this air inlet is basically, you can say, it is a modeled phenomena from the steam, because the steam is continuously being generated due to some failure in nuclear reactor. So only thing which we can control is the inlet water. This air inlet is basically, it comes from the steam, basically. So instead of steam, they are using water. But what I'm saying is that the air inlet velocity is not in our hands. So in our hands, we have to control the water inlet only. So water inlet, we have to provide it in such a way that it will not block this. So that is called the counter current flow limit. So it has very good features if you compare. I mean, when you talk about hydrodynamics, there is a lot of things happening here. You have first of all the counter current flow limit, which means that the air is sufficiently fast to not allow water to flow in this direction. It can actually stop that. While doing it, what happens is that it forms the waves, basically. Then you have spray generation, you have droplet carried over, you have bubble entrainment, and you can actually see slug formation also, which are seen experimentally. So these things you have to model, and this is truly a multiple flow regime kind of problem, that you have large interfaces, you have droplets and bubbles. So here, if you actually see, here we actually apply, when we model the closure laws of bubbles. I mean, here it's a droplet thing. When it is bubbly flow, you will have the bubbly flow drag. So it will actually behave as a bubbly flow. Here it will actually behave as a droplet flow. Here it behaves as a large interface. So that's the whole modeling, you can say, kind of, scope of this problem. These are details I'll just skip for a moment. It's been published, but it's a 3D simulation, and this is the geometry. And this actually we had to do on a very, very fine mesh. But the point is that if you were doing this on a volume of fluid kind of thing, then you would require much more than this. And the two experimental runs basically we have picked up. And in this case, the mass of air actually changes because, like I said, that this comes from the experimental data, which is like so this basically replicates the steam thing. So here are some results. These are, first I'll show the qualitative results. So we see that, okay, there is a hydraulic jump happening, there is slug, droplets, bubbles, and these things we have tried to capture in both the runs. Here we see, I'm sorry if it's not very clear. Just a minute. And this is the quantitative data. So this air and this is the mass flow rate that we give at the inlet. This is the mass flow rate here at this location and at this location. At two locations we are comparing. We get, similar ranges here. Obviously, it's very chaotic here, and all we can do is that we can compare the ranges here, and that's what we are seeing, right? So I'll move to another application. It's a subcooled liquid injection. Again, this comes from a nuclear kind of thing application. Here again, the thing is that I'm not sure if it's very closely captured here, but what happens is that you have a domain which is filled with vapor actually, which is superheated. You inject liquid which is subcooled. So as you inject, you will see that it will become vapor basically. Now, as it becomes vapor, in some cells, the interface size will become subgrid. The interface will become smaller than the cell size, and that's when the dispersed modeling kicks in. So that is happening here, and here again we have tried to compare it with experiments, and we get fairly good comparison when you calculate the penetration depth and all those things. So again, this is a nuclear application which has a kind of the multiple flow regime modeling has a role in this. The final application that I'll just discuss about is the pipeline flow. So you have co-current flow of air and water. This is a 6 centimeter diameter flow, and it's an 18-meter long pipe. So again, it's a very long pipe, and we want the pressure drop. And we have used the turb damping, which I mentioned, but just to reiterate, so I'll not go into the interface plots and all those things, but what we have done is that we have modeled the distance that I told, that this you can estimate from the cell size, or right now what we have done, we have introduced a level set kind of thing in which you actually get the interface distance. So when you do that additional modeling, the results further improve. So the experimental pressure drop is 6.76. If you don't do turb damping, it's not even very close. It's just way away. Here the error, you can say, is 300% difference is there. Here you can see the error is about 100%. Here the error is about 200%. So still the error is there. It's a very long pipe. We are doing on a very, you can say, relatively coarse grid here, but you get a ballpark number which is there. So that's the benefit of it. So I'll just summarize here. So you can say the simulation of multi-phase flow itself is an efficient technique. So by simulation, I mean all the techniques that we use. It's now, I think, a very, you can say, mature techniques are there to analyze complex flow situations. There are different methods, basically, to different applications. So I've actually I've actually skipped some of the things, like we can do erosion. Then when we do size distribution modeling, you can do nucleation, you can do crystal growth, you can do casting. All those things I have not yet covered in this presentation, but those things also you can kind of try and model. And the final point is that the methodologies to simulate multiple flow regimes have been developed to enable modeling and simulation of realistic multi-phase situations. So whatever work we are doing right now for multiple flow regimes, it is still developing, and over a period of time, we hope that this will get matured enough. So we are still developing those things. We are publishing every now and then, and hopefully it will be better over time. So yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's all I have. Yeah. Any queries, questions? Feel free.
Very much, Vinish. There are few questions which are not technical as such, but maybe you can answer. There is a question by Vikas Chauhan. What skill set do one should have to get absorbed as a CFD engineer in a good core company?
Let me see. I'll just see which skill set in a good core company. Okay, there are two things. First of all, I am like a developer, so I would just answer from the development point of view. I think the modeling skills are more important. Coding skills are important. But for an application engineer, if you are talking about, some of our clients, they hire application engineers like, Mercedes-Benz, or there are many other clients. So there, I think the main thing is that the knowledge about different methodologies, limitations, and some experience would always help. That, you should know the latest technologies available, and then how to use them for your practical problem. So if you are asking about that, then I would really say that some experience in doing some application, CFD application in detail, would be helpful.
Then there is another question here.
So does Industries require doctoral? Yes, I am a doctor. I mean, I've done PhD, and yes, actually for development role, we mostly require PhDs only. And for development, PhDs are preferable. For application support, also we have PhDs. For service industry, we don't have PhDs. For the when the primary query comes from the client, we generally have masters. And so these are the three major roles. Then there is fourth role, which is quality assurance engineer, in which again masters would be preferred. So four roles, I'll just reiterate. There is development, there is application support, there is service, basically the core support engineer, and then there is quality assurance engineers. And out of these, for application support and development, PhD would be preferred. But even if there is no PhD, if you have enough experience, I think for all the roles, masters would be minimum. Third, I'll just move to, does Siemens provide research support industrial problems? Our college has Siemens COE and TA. This actually, see, something I'll just share with you, because our own company was CD Adapco, and now Siemens has taken over. So to be very, very frank, we have not yet, you can say, come in terms with everything the Siemens has to offer about this, because we used to have TAs with CD Adapco earlier. Temporarily, we didn't have them. Now I think maybe we will have that, but very frankly, I'll have to search about this. Maybe I can get back to Sevatkar sir, and he can get back to you.
There is a question: unique features of Star CCM Plus or ANSYS.
I think more or less similar features. It's just about availability, because a lot of universities have ANSYS easily available compared to CCM Plus. We are number 2, they are number 1. and I would say that it's only a matter of time before a feature. So at the most, what will happen in one release cycle, you will see, okay, they have something that we don't have, but then we will have it in the next release cycle. Something we don't have, they'll have. So it's just a catch up game. So similar, I would say they're similar functionality wise. But CCM Plus has a better user experience from one survey. I can actually assure you that. So that is one thing. But from physics point of view, I think it's similar performance. And Vikas has this another question. How? Yes, it's a very good tool, but it is a bit overwhelming because in OpenFOAM. So the question I'll just repeat: how good is OpenFOAM to learn development of CFD? I would say it's very good, but it also requires that you know C++ very well. So to me, that is if somebody does in OpenFOAM, then they develop a very good skill to be absorbed in a CFD development company. But at the same time, the learning of C++ itself, if it is tough for you, then just for sake of doing CFD, OpenFOAM may not be good. You can actually do Scilab or MATLAB or something that way. Do Siemens provide any free subscriptions? I'll have to check with this. We have an academic program, and I don't know how that works, but I can get back. Drop my email address. Yeah, it's just vineshgada@gmail.com. Yes, the another question for simulation of flow boiling, is ANSYS Fluent okay? I think yes, it's okay. Depends on what you are simulating. If you are simulating just the wall, I mean, there is a wall boiling model. If you are doing something like film boiling kind of situation where you don't need wall boiling, or if you are doing nucleate boiling, then you have to select appropriate models. But yes, it's fine actually. Yes, the condensation problem. In fact, the two examples that I showed were of condensation, actually. So there is a question: is there any readily module available in Star CCM Plus to solve condensation problems? So the answer to that is yes. We have condensation. So the boiling condensation go hand in hand. There is no special thing, anything. It's just based on the temperature difference. It will be boiled or it will get condensed. So yes, it can be done. Suggest some good post processor for CFD. Okay, during my PhD, I used to have TechPlot. Now we have it in our own software in CCM Plus. So I think the answer to that would be TechPlot. And I'm sure with OpenFOAM, there is a lot of other good softwares. Yes, we have. So that's what I said. Right? I actually didn't cover the crystal growth or solidification melting. So we have different things for casting, dendritic solidification. Yeah, we have that.
Is there any more question, participants? Can we get tutorial video in Star CCM for any multi-flow?
I think yes, there is a tutorial. I'll actually share that. I think there are webinars from time to time. So I think yeah, there is, and I will actually share that. I'll just make a note.
Okay. Is there any coding language required for Star CCM?
So just before that, there was this ANSYS default mesh question. So I'm actually not sure about that. Sir, ANSYS default mesh CFD result is better or manual mesh result? Which tool is best for high quality mesh? That would be, I'm frankly not very conversant with that part about meshing. And is there any coding language required for Star CCM Plus? So Star CCM Plus is a commercial software. So it's like more or less button pressing. But if you want to do some user coding, you will require C++.
User defined functions.
Yeah, if you want to define user but for that also examples have been given. You have to change in that only. So that way it's not a very difficult thing.
So I think there are no more questions. So we come to an end of the lecture by Dr. Gada. Thank you very much, Dr. Vinesh Gada, for sharing your valuable knowledge. I'm sure participants must have benefited through this. I mean, they must have, in fact. This was really useful and will help them to develop the understanding of as to how to go ahead with the development and carry out the analysis. In fact, there was huge analysis involved into this kind of work. Huge analysis involved in such kind of work. I'm thankful to you for sparing your valuable time. On the behalf of our institute, Government College of Engineering and Research, Ausari, we are in fact indebted to you for your sharing your knowledge. I'm thankful to you on the behalf of All India Council for Technical Education also, which has actually given sponsorship to this particular program. So thank you very much, Dr. Vinesh. We will be keeping in touch with you. We will definitely require your knowledge for different programs like this in future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, sir, for having me. And just one little thing, we have tried to publish most of the things, and most of the papers are, I think, available if you just to Google or I mean, on ResearchGate or stuff. And if anybody wants a paper, so the reason for saying this is that if somebody is doing in academia and they want to incorporate this into an open source code like OpenFOAM, I think there is enough thing published which can facilitate that. So it's not very restricted to having it in a particular software only. So that's the idea. Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you have something specific to communicate with them, please do communicate to me. I will pass on to them.
Sure, sir. Yeah. Thank you so much.
There's a group of around 200 people to which I can pass on everything so that the academia will be benefited through your experience.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So, dear participants, thank you very much for joining the session. Thus, we come to an end of almost all the technical sessions with this particular session by Dr. Vinesh Gada. We will be meeting again at 2:30. At 2:30, Professor Malkhede will be addressing all of us about the role of teachers in the technical education. He will speak. Professor Malkhede is a senior advisor to All India Council for Technical Education. So on the behalf of AICT, we will present there. And then we will have a small concluding session of maybe 15-20 minutes, during which you can share your oral feedbacks also. I have requested some of the participants personally to share their feedback, so that if we arrange such kind of workshops in future, we will come to know as to what is the due care to be taken. I mean, your positive as well as both the feedbacks. If there are certain lacunas which you might have experienced, please feel free to express that also. Doesn't matter, and we'll be definitely trying to incorporate those and overcome those lacunas also in the next courses. We'll be keeping. As I said, we have conducted such kind of courses in past also. We'll be doing that again. So thank you very much. Let us join again at 2:30. I'll be leaving the meeting for now. Thank you very much.